begin our discussion about what great art is, I think we need to first think about what art does for us. What is the purpose of art in our lives? Ella mentioned that art is reaching for something higher. I think it is a way in which we are able to experience that which is most important to us in front of us, whether that's in visual arts or music, which I said I wouldn't talk about, or literature. Now, we need the concept to distinguish work which does that, work which shows us what matters, what's really important, from decoration, which can be beautiful, but doesn't have that thematic value. Or journalism or history, which show us some things that are important, but by reproducing the facts or sharing the facts rather than creating something new, rather than having the selectivity of the artist. We also need to separate art from nonsense. And if you've been in a modern art gallery recently, I'm sorry, it's there. From the actual trash that a janitor correctly identified as such and threw away, to smears on canvases. This is not art. Art is so vitally important to us, we have to separate it from that sort of thing. So, to offer a positive definition, I think that art is a selective recreation of reality, in which the artist emphasizes what he or she thinks is important, what he or she thinks matters. It is necessarily selective, whether you're talking about every brushstroke on a painting, or every note in a symphony, or every word that an author writes. He or she chooses it. Necessarily, they choose. And good art does so in a way that condenses and illuminates things that are important, things that are valuable, things that may be positive or negative. You mentioned suffering. Suffering could be one of them. But things that are potentially universal. Not that literally everyone has experienced them, but everyone could experience them in the abstract. I'm not talking about the specific context here. So for example, I'm a huge fantasy fan. I love Lord of the Rings. I don't connect to the characters in the Fellowship because I too have taken a ring to Mordor. I connect with the characters because I too have faced challenges that felt insurmountable. Because I too have found friends with whom I shared a common goal and with whom I went through hardships. Because I share the view that there is something good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. There are a couple of ways we can evaluate art in a way that is not just, oh, it's subjective. First, there is objectively identifying what the values there are in art. And again, this is why we have to separate out art from nonsense. What is the thing saying? And this does not have to be in a pedantic, ideological way. It can be subtler, and indeed I think should be subtler than that. We can also assess the skills of an artist, and this is where the value of the art critic comes in. He or she has much more knowledge than the average person ever could hope to have. This is the value of expertise. Then there's the personal. We mustn't set aside the emotional resonance, but we should seek to understand it and seek what values are setting off that emotional resonance in us, whether it's positive or negative. Of course, everyone will have their own associations with art because of memories, because of your background, because of your relationships, because of what makes you unique. But this is not, I think, part of evaluating art. It's simply part of enjoying it. So, great art, I would argue, depicts universal experiences, condensed truths, and deep values, ideally with remarkable skill in an original and perhaps creative way. In terms of who gets to decide those standards, as I mentioned briefly, I argue that the art critic or historian has a role to play in their knowledge of the skill and the context of the artist. But art should be able to stand on its own such that a thoughtful viewer or reader or listener could appreciate it. It is fine for an artist to ask his or her audience to think, but it is not the same thing for an artist to ask his or her audience to have an entire library's worth of knowledge at their beck and call. Art is way too important for that. Art is something that we all need, and that is why great art truly matters.